We're delighted to have Jay Sharman from Teamworks Media presenting today. Jay, do you want to take it away with your presentation?
Sure, thanks, Michaela. Great to connect with everyone, even though this is a one-way street. So appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules. As Michaela said, my name is Jay Sharman. I am the CEO and founder of Teamworks Media. We are proud to announce and be back with our friends at Converge on this webinar and introduce you to Storied U, which is our new community, online community brought to you by Teamworks for higher ed professionals in marketing, admissions, and advancement. Quick brief background on Teamworks from a higher ed perspective. We really do large-scale, emotionally engaging digital media in the higher ed sector, as well as engagement on site. Many of you may have seen our work with the Big Ten Conference. We do a large platform called BTN Live Big. So the reason I tell you that is we are on campuses pretty much every day, producing all 14 Big Ten institutions and producing about 250 online articles and 60 original pieces of video content per year. And one of the impetuses for this survey was really for selfish reasons in terms of what are prospects looking for, what is sticking with them at what phase in the journey. And so as we go through this, this is our first inaugural survey. We look to do this on an annual basis. A little bit of an overview here. You can see the demographics on your screen. 328 rising juniors, 328 high schoolers, 56% are now rising seniors and just graduated seniors. From 15 different Illinois high schools, we worked really hard to get all ends of the socioeconomic strata and ensure that each person that took the survey was planning on going to a four-year nonprofit university. This is a snapshot today. The good news is you're going to get 15 minutes of your day back, because I think we'll be done in 45. This is a real highlights, I guess I'd say, of a white paper that's coming out in August. That's somewhere in 25 to 30 pages of in-depth results analysis and recommendations on this survey. And while we know that, I mean, each of you are very familiar with the prospect funnel, and you may have different names and break it down into different phases, we try to simplify it into three phases for today. And one is the prospect phase, being at the top of the funnel, the inquiry phase in the middle, and then the courtship phase. So as we walk through that, those are the three pieces that we're going to start with. And we'll start with the prospect phase. So as you can see, probably no surprises in terms of how students are finding out about universities, with web search at 31% being number one, family or friend being second, and a college ranking website being almost 13%. When you combine web search and college ranking websites, nearly half, or 44% of the prospects, are first discovering you through some type of online search. And I think that's important in the fact that it substantiates just a base level. Family or friend are still important. There are other factors that aren't on there that made the list. School counselor was 11%. Even sports team came up. Sports on television came up around 6 or 7%. So there are other factors. I think that we're a little surprised by the fact that just over 6% of prospects first become aware of your schools through social media. Based on the narratives going on, we thought that number might be higher. However, when you think about it a little bit, it tends to make sense. We're talking about first becoming aware, and it also begs the chicken-egg question of is it because universities aren't creating content that's relevant at this stage, or is it because they're not looking, prospects aren't looking on these mediums at that stage? And we'll talk a bit about that in a minute. I thought the last stat was somewhat surprising in terms of that just over 1 out of 4 respondents either strongly agreed or agreed to the statement that they look at a school's social media accounts before deciding to apply there. Again, I would have thought this was higher. I expect next year when we look at this, that number to go up. Nearly half disagreed or strongly agreed, and the rest were pretty much indifferent to it. So those are some of the highlights of the prospect phase survey results. Okay, so what do we do with that information? I think some tactics to think about in this stage, and if nothing else, hopefully you've got a couple stats here, and we can get the mind going into a couple of ahas. We really, when we looked at this, and I write in depth about this in the white paper, when we talk about SEO, we're not talking about the data analytics piece of SEO, we're talking about the authentic content. I think there's an opportunity here for universities to really help prospects navigate this process. There's never been more ways to get information. New platforms keep popping up. It's, for all of us on this call, it was an overwhelming experience for many of us in our own world. It's even more overwhelming now. And I think there's a real need for solid content from your schools about being the guide. Not on the guide to come to your specific school, on the guide on how to navigate the journey. Things like if you're creating blog content, the top 10 things I wish I knew when I was applying from a current student, that are just in general ways to organize your thought, help people on this process. We'll share an example of some folks who are doing some interesting things, but I still think this space is pretty wide open. And we know from other clients that you can gain a lot of credibility by being authentic and just by being the curator or conveyor of this message. It doesn't have to be look at us and look what we're doing. Which ties into your page search. How is the content providing value? I think the complicating matrix here is that there are so many different target audiences that you're going after, and depending on who the audience is, determines what stage, in determining what stage they're at in the prospect funnel and the time of year. Right? So, for example, obviously going up to decision day around May 1, there's a heightened sensitivity around those that are further down the funnel and trying to convert those. And where are you messaging to those, and on what platforms, as opposed to, say, right now, where rising sophomores and rising juniors are further up the prospect funnel, and they're thinking about navigating, visiting colleges in general, or ones they're starting to narrow down, and traveling across the country to do so. Rankings and PR, again, going to that authentic content. Happy to talk about this one-on-one or give you suggestions on if you don't have the resources to do this in terms of keyword searching. What are prospects looking for at this stage? They're going to web search 1 out of 3 and nearly 1 out of 2 if you look at the college ranking websites. And how is the content that you're creating matching up with what kids are actually searching for at this stage? The last piece is the personal referrals, and obviously word of mouth is one of the most challenging to control. You can't control it, but you can guide it. I still think at the prospect funnel, there's kind of 2 targets. There's the prospects and their parents. We all tend, I think, in our own worlds to over-index on anecdotal evidence. I know the #1 question I get on the cocktail party circuit from my friends who are going through this with their college-bound children right now is, my son or daughter wants to be an English major, and I'm paying $250,000 a year, and what are the job prospects for that? Equipping them with content that answers that not only can help your prospect, who should feel great about the liberal arts education, it can also help address the ever-increasing ROI question from parents on, what am I going to get, and is this going to be worth it? Regardless of you're a public institution or a private institution, and prices, we all know, is very relative and individualized. So a couple examples of some things that we think are being done pretty well, that are definitely in the right neighborhood of where things we believe will go. American University, I believe a client of our friends at Converge, and that is not why they're on here. It's on here because it's great. And Terry Flannery, the CMO, I saw her present on this at a conference, and this notion of helping people answer that question. This is from American's website, right? You can see at the top, they're directly answering in the realm of American. Choose your own adventure here. If you're an undergraduate with a degree in history in the College of Arts and Sciences, okay, what happens? And this is just a screen grab. If you go down, it's really rich. There's like 5 or 6 pages here. It goes into top employers. It segments it by industry. Some really rich information in there that American is being smart on helping answer some of those obstacle questions that are out there. I really think the next gen on this is taking the school off and doing it in general. right? What are the top jobs for English majors or history majors at four-year liberal arts institutions? What are those things? Creating content, creating an easy way to navigate folks to really understand the value proposition, especially at this journey. It's not to say you can't customize it and say, look at us as you get further down the road. But, I think one thing we talk about here, there's this notion, and I believe it's Indiana does this in their admissions acceptance letters, and it's if you should choose to go somewhere else, we hope they love you as much as we do, right? It's that notion that we know you have decisions to make. We want to be a guide for you. We think we could be a good fit, as opposed to look at us. So kudos to American for doing this. I know they've had significant positive results as a way of doing this. Another thing here, and this says MFA, but this notion of creating content, again, from American around career paths, in this case for MFA grads. It's more around that notion of, okay, English grads or history major or whatever the major may be, political science, guiding people on how to connect the dots on where their interests connect to their future. These are things, again, at the early stages, you're helping shape someone's opinions on what they want to be. 63% said that they know what their major is. You guys know the statistics better than we do at respective institutions of how many people change majors how many times. And so just being that guide and being intentional of being a steward in the jungle that is the prospect journey is kind of our key takeaway. How we tactically populate that into whether it's Snapchat or Instagram or direct mail campaigns or email campaigns, those are customized conversations that would, because you guys are all individually unique and have your own set of circumstances. So that's the prospect journey. So the next phase we're going to talk about here is the inquiry phase, and some key highlights here. This is, I think at the top of the funnel, probably an oversimplification, but if you look at the continuum of stats and facts down to emotional engagement, stats and facts tend to index higher in the prospect phase, where emotional engagement gets cranked up a few notches as you go down the prospect funnel. Here in the inquiry phase, we're midway through the funnel. It's an even mix. I thought the results you see on your page here in terms of influential factors for prospective students, and more than 2/3 of them saying that feeling like I belong socially is either very important or essential as the #1 answer, was really eye-opening for us, I think. Safety came in at #2, academic reputation came in at #3, and I think when you look at these, they may or may not confirm or refute what's going on your own campuses. But we gave quite a few options here on these answers. Cost was, of the 14 or so answers, was middle of the pack. Living accommodations was middle of the pack. Placement rates in jobs was 4th, tied up right there with campus culture. So there was a lot of things that were bunched together after this. These were the top 3 that stood out. 1/3 of prospective students do agree that social media gives them a sense of campus culture. I think I'd be curious. I wish this was more of an interactive platform, because I'd love to see the buzzer on how many think that number is high or low. One side of the equation would say 1 in 3 is significant, that social media is indeed impacting. It is a prism into your campus culture, and you could argue it could change at different phases here. I still think, again, this is a number that's going to grow as universities find more resources for social, as social adoption continues, and those two intersections becoming more sophisticated. Students wanting to engage with the university, one of the most common questions we get, the quid pro quo with this is where prospective students want to be that you're not, which we'll get to. Here, Facebook, 43%. The narrative that we're hearing when I'm out speaking, the #1, 2, and 3 questions I get are about Snapchat. It came in under 10%. Again, there's an element of is this where universities are and that's why they're engaging, or are students expecting you to be here? You know, there's a chicken egg element to this as well that comes into the consideration set. What do we do with these numbers? I think employing some tactics here under a couple of different umbrellas are important. I want to take a couple minutes and talk about websites. We didn't profile, in the survey, which had about 25 questions, we did not specifically dive deep into the minutia of websites. We talked more general about social media and engagement at large. Websites are still important. You guys know that. You have the metrics in front of you. It's one of the places where I think we all feel we have the most control, because you can see who comes, who moves through the funnel, and those types of things. I think something to keep in mind, though, is that as we move forward, there's a transactional component to a website where people are going to need to come back to, right? Whether it's get more information or sign up for a college tour, whatever those things may be. There are transactional elements to that. But as we get in further down the funnel, really rethinking the website as part of the larger ecosystem and not as kind of the centerpiece of it all is a shift that we think is going to happen. And by that, what does that mean for you? Well, the content that you're already creating on your social media channels that lives out there in these various you know, sometimes connected, sometimes disconnected ecosystem, the website really should be, you've got a lot of content being made, you should really be thinking about how can I refresh that baked fresh daily. As people start to come back to your site, they're wanting to see more. They're wanting to be, and even if that website becomes more of a guide, I know University of Michigan has had a lot of props for what they've done by their social media portal that ties all of their social media handles together in one place, making it easy for people to kind of choose their own adventure. Just by doing that, the content's changing every day. It looks different. It looks fresh. And it's not cumbersome. They're just kind of curating content they're already doing in a way that shows that they're updating things. I think these things are important. And we'll talk about YouTube and some other assets later that are going to tie into where websites are going. Personalization and customization is key, and we'll show you an example of what that is. Virtual tour, this is something, one of the things you'll see in a minute is just how overwhelming the statistics are in terms of what a game changer getting people on your campus is, which most of you probably feel. Some of you may even have research to back that up. We're going to supercharge that if that was your point of view. That's what we're finding to be true as well. With that, you know, I think things like virtual tours and becoming visual on your site and pulling people through becomes all that more important. You know, UVisit, we've worked with, some of you have used them, I'm sure, in terms of their in-the-box solution for virtual tours on your college campus. We recently did a highly customized version for one university client, and it shows that it's even more than the numbers here, that 30% more likely to visit your campus in person after seeing a virtual tour. So if you have them, make sure you're using them in the right places for that transaction, because I really think that conversion to the on-campus visit should be a key metric. At least that's what the survey results are bearing witness to. From a social media perspective, digital natives expecting more media now. I know we don't like to hear that because we feel it's overwhelming in terms of the content creation, budget limitations, you know, targeting by channel, who's where, when. It's just the numbers bear it out. I mean, it's significant in terms of, you know, if 1 in 3 people are saying that your actual prism, a true prism to your campus culture is social media, that's significant. And it's something that should, you know, at least make us step back and look at it and assess the type of content we're doing and answer that question. How is this emotionally engaging? How is this, who is this resonating with it, and at which part of the funnel? I think YouTube is something, tipping the hat of survey result coming up. One of the things that we did was some qualitative follow-up. There's an educational foundation here in Illinois we have a relationship with. They primarily work with first-gen college-bound students, but their counselors tour 60 total selective and highly selective universities every year. They're on their campuses, they go on the visits, they chaperone these visits. So they are true, they're one of my go-to olive branches for real-time information on what's going on these visits, and consistently this comes up, and that is the notion of wanting to see a dorm room, wanting to see a cafeteria, wanting to see a classroom. Those three things are universally popping up as things that parents, even more so than students, are wanting to see. And with the tools of YouTube and other social media, there's no excuse in today's day and age not to, if you can't, for whatever reason, do that on an on-campus visit, be doing it socially. I think we all can come up with excuses on why we can't do it, but it's pretty overwhelming qualitatively how much there's a want out there for this. And I'll link to a blog post here that really goes in depth on this in terms of what parents of college prospects are looking for from you that you're not delivering on the on-campus visit. A couple of examples. I like to use examples of things that we have nothing to do with because they don't seem self-serving. Bucknell, no relation to Bucknell, no relation to the company that did this website. If you go to the Bucknell's homepage, I mentioned this actually in my presentation at Converge, so for those of you that saw this, I apologize for the follow-up, but this is kind of my bar. The homepage, which this is not, this is a subpage, the homepage enables you to customize your experience. There's a drop-down menu, and it gives you about 8 or 9 different items so that when you come back, it's customized to meet your need. It's almost irrelevant, the notion of what those things are. The fact that they are personalizing and customizing that experience in and of themselves is separating them from the pack. And so kudos to them. I think others have followed. They're one of the first that I saw. This is, if you go to their site, it's really well done in terms of taking, this is history major. When you click on one of their 100 majors, they all look similar in terms of their structure, but this is their history page, right? And they've got a nice image in terms of the leafy campus. They've got a virtual tour, like we just talked about. They have a young alum story who is connecting the dots on how your history major is going to pay off down the road. They've got some fun facts, and they've got a link to a video talking about faculty, which we'll talk about in a minute, came up surprisingly high in terms of something that prospects are getting influenced by. So I think this is a good example. It's also centralized, as it relates to SEO and content. I know this is an easier said than done challenge. Many of the schools that we see still have a decentralized system where individual colleges or individual programs have their own online presence. It's not optimized for search. It's not tied into the master site. And Bucknell did a really good job of bringing that all together. So it's pretty clean and the like. I think the next gen of what we're talking about here, though, is creating ways where they have social media and other content, whether it's current student content, university social media content, to be able to populate and make it new. If I'm a history major and I come back here, great. I'm in. I like this. I want more. And so what are the things that we can be doing, taking existing assets and repurposing them through that prospect journey? I think that's kind of the next gen of where things are going here. Our friend Tom Atkinson, who recently at Indiana believes Instagram's the new college view book. It's pretty self-explanatory quote. We're going to segue into, as we go deeper down the funnel here, in terms of now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of that emotional engagement piece. Instagram scored pretty highly as something that prospects want universities to dive deeper into. Courtship phase. So almost 80% of the prospects are citing campus visits as increasing their likelihood of attending that college. Again, this is something that may not be, the number may be a surprise one way or the other, but it's probably no surprise to everyone on the phone that campus visits are really important. So 21% of the prospects agree that college admission presentations are unique. We look at this as, I should have probably highlighted this one and circled this one. When it comes to emotional engagement, universities in general and colleges are not doing a great job at standing out from the pack. And while it's not in here, I think the majority of respondents to the survey were at a minimum 4 to 7, and I think the mean was somewhere around 8 to 9 colleges. We have it in the white paper, but increasingly, and you guys know this, people are applying to more schools, and therefore trying to differentiate yourself becomes all the more challenging. I think one of the things that we're seeing when we're talking to college admissions executives, there's a lot of different theories on why this number is low. I think I've heard some admissions executives tell me that when they're doing road shows and when you go to different presentations, you have to abide by the same format, and so then it gets reverse engineered back in your own place. I really think if there's one place I want to pinpoint in this entire presentation, this is it, because we're hearing this is the emotional sticky part. This is where you shine. People are looking for that. How do I fit in here? Will I fit in here? All things being equal, it comes down to that fit piece. And I dare you to be different. I dare you to not look over the shoulder. And by the time someone's at this phase, they know your student-to-faculty ratio. They know the stats and facts. And with the exception of admissions and financial aid information there, this is where they want to know the essence of your brand and who you are and who goes there. I think we recently, one of the things, I'll go back to that in a second. 41% agree campus tours give a true representation of the campus culture. I was a little surprised at this number. I thought it would have been higher. But I think, again, it points to consumers are smart. They know when you're doing a campus tour that you're putting the best foot forward and it's the glossy image. My only caveat here, and it came up anecdotally, was that certain things be careful of. People have eyes and ears open when they're on your campus. If you're talking about your diversity and people are walking through your cafeteria and they're seeing ethnic groups siloed, don't talk about diversity. Find a different point of differentiation, because you have to actually be what you say you are. Tour guides are an extremely influential tool in the overall toolkit here, but I think that authentic storytelling still wins the day. I alluded to this before. 39% of folks, this was number one. The number one thing that prospects think you're not paying enough attention to is Snapchat. So while it rated really low in terms of how they want it to be engaged or how they're engaging with you, it's significantly percentage-wise number one. YouTube's number two. And reached out to University of Michigan and their social media team to kind of run these numbers by them. They agree this is kind of what they're seeing. You'll see in a second here their thoughts on YouTube, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. 38% of prospects reporting that they feel more engaged. I think of note, just for context, earlier in the funnel, it's a 10% increase in terms of earlier in the funnel. So definitely the closer that they're getting to, the more they're towards the courtship phase, the more the social media impact has on them. Some pretty interesting things going on out there in the marketplace around this specifically. I talked to one of the directors of social media at Michigan about this, and he talked about Snapchat. And one of the things that he talked about is Michigan's primarily using it for students that are actually already admitted and attending as a transitionary way for folks to actually acclimate and get a sample and get them excited, which I thought was interesting because other folks are using it in the courtship phase, and we'll talk about a case study like that. So there's a lot of experimentation going on with Snapchat. I don't think, there's anecdotal evidence of things that are working well, and we'll share one or two of those things. I want to go back to the on-campus piece now. We asked people on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not important and 5 being essential, the following factors with regards to campus visit. it gets cut off here a little bit because number 1 is actually information about, it says ... That should read financial aid and admissions. But for context, if you look, feeling welcomed by the university was actually right there. And if you combine those that rate 4 or 5 together, it was number 1. So 67% of respondents felt that being welcomed by the university was either very important or essential. That one jumped off the page at us because I love when the solution isn't necessarily an expensive fix. This is something that today you could address. And by that I mean, again, going to some anecdotal evidence, a university greeting people at the door and shaking their hand. One piece of evidence was, we know you have a lot of choices when it comes to college. Thank you for choosing your time to spend it with us today. As opposed to someone sitting behind a desk, someone going into a very anxious environment, not really feeling like they're excited, and someone scanning down a list and saying, I'm not sure I see you here on the list. I mean, these are the little things. What kept coming up were the strongest anecdotes were some of these little things on campus. That being said, faculty, campus beauty, tour guide, and stories that provide the feeling that I'd fit in here are all pretty close. They're all important. Everything with the exception of famous and accomplished alumni stories, which was significantly below 1 out of 2. All the rest of these were either very important or essential by 1 out of 2 respondents. And so my question to you is, how is your on-campus visitors' experience matching up with this, both in terms of subject matter and in terms of approach? I think we just recently completed a visitor center overhaul with a major, highly selective university where we broke down every phase of that process. So there's a waiting area in a lobby, and it's a pretty tense environment. And you know, one of the frustrations they had was there were so many stories they wanted to tell, but yet they didn't know who was coming through the door. So how do you create an environment? You know, we created a 20-foot interactive choose your own adventure experience where by subject matter you could go deep and try to find relatable stories. How are we coordinating the tour guides with the people that are welcoming people and making sure that they're feeling welcome? How are you actually using your information session in a way that you're giving unique information? Like, you've got a captive audience there. They've already looked up your information. They know your stats and facts. And again, information about financial aid and applications is a must, but stuff that they can be getting on their cell phone while they're waiting in the lobby is not the stuff that you should be regurgitating to them there. This is about feel and emotion. What's a day in the life like? What's it like to be in a classroom? What are your teachers like? What are the students like? All of those different types of things are things that, when you have that captive audience in this courtship phase, are critical. Yassine Aydin, he has it here. YouTube's become the forgotten platform for colleges. You have to remember, for most of these teens, it's their first screen, not their second. I think that's a good awakening for us. Many of you may have children that are of age where they're using YouTube or even on their college search or through their college search, but you know, it's become the how-to tutorial. And so how come we're not using YouTube to say, as a tutorial, as a search, to say how to begin the overwhelming journey of selecting a college, how to find the best resources to select a college, how to. Some schools are doing some really neat things with this. Some things, you know, things like profiling their faculty and doing some thought-provoking things. But again, I think there's an element of YouTube and Snapchat in particular that can be used as that guide, and then at different stages be used as a way to really supercharge the emotional engagement. Some tactics too. I kind of went here on the previous slide in terms of the campus visit. Be sure you're using your own channels to get folks on campus. We talked about the admissions presentations, about dropping the stats and facts. I have a link in here. You'll get this download where it's Jim and the Dairy Farms. Link on that if you get a chance. It's an anonymous post. It's a blog post that I recently did on StoryToYou.com that was anonymous, of a father of a daughter who is going through the search right now. She's looking, I think she's done 25 campus visits across the country. She's from Florida. She's looking at highly selective and selective schools, primarily in the Northeast, some in the Midwest. And it was interesting. He kind of gave me a tell-all of all the things that he's frustrated about when he's going on the campus tours that he's not getting, that he's hearing, and they're matching up very much so with the anecdotal evidence we're hearing, whether it's the cocktail parties or from your consumers. And I read Jim and the Dairy Farms because when I asked him the single most memorable thing that his daughter had on the experience, this is a really smart girl with a 33 ACT, and you know she can kind of write her own ticket. It was one New York university that wove their rural location into a dairy farm narrative and gave people an ice cream sandwich. That's what stuck out. It was $1, what's that, a 50-cent item that gave a memorable impression, but the way that they incorporated it into the story was memorable, and it impacted her. It gave her a favorable feel on the experience. And I think we sometimes forget about these small little things that make the huge difference. Not all of these things need to be seven-figure solutions to redo stuff. It's an attention to detail on some of this emotional winning the heart piece, which goes with social media, you know, making it personal, helping prospects to connect with each other. And I don't know who's on this actual call. I know I've seen many examples of people doing great things with Facebook and connecting your admitted students together and having those types of tactics work. But really using social media as a platform and you rethinking yourself as a media publisher to connect with this audience. I think one of the most common questions I get is, I have a hard time getting my faculty to do a blog post or my administrators to submit a guest post. And my comeback to that is don't. Find the communication experts on your team who are great at telling stories and have them tell the story. Sit down with a faculty member, and it can be with a camera, it can be with an iPhone camera if you don't have the resources to do it, but map out what you want to do and have the faculty tell their story. Do an interview. Make it concise, know what you want going in, and share that. You know, Professor X, what are the 5 tips that you would give to somebody who's looking to go on their college journey of becoming a history major, if you're talking to a history professor, whatever it may be, an engineering major? Those types of things where you're making your fellow colleagues rock stars and putting them out there, and then to go back and say, hey, look, 197 people viewed that video. A, it makes them feel good. B, you're able to track it and see you're starting to connecting the dots between the information on the info that your prospects want and where they want it. Couple examples here. Emily Truex at Boston University is someone I continue to track. They've been having success with Snapchat. She has a nice blog post about exactly what they did in terms of kind of a Q&A session for admitted students that they did, kind of real-time instant messaging and Snapchat, engaged for 2 hours. She has all kinds of tips on there in terms of they answered all sorts of questions, and they were really creative with it. It was, what are the things in Boston that I could most benefit from? And they did a dry erase board, right? And they got creative with some paraphernalia and notepads and other things that they did on their snaps. They had some tools at their disposal and did some real-time feedbacks. And they, they had several hundred students, and the students started doing thank you videos back to them. Some person even did a piece of artwork and snapped it to their community. So, while it was only, I believe, 200 or so folks, it definitely increased engagement significantly with them. It was customized. It was personal. They felt like, as an individual, B is a pretty large school, as an individual, that they were being attended to on their needs and being met on their terms. So I think, that's one example. There are many others. I'd love to hear them from you. I'm sure you guys have a wealth of examples of things that are working and not working. As you can imagine, when you're doing a general survey and trying to speak to an anonymous audience of 100 university executives, it's difficult to get a feel for feedback, and also knowing you each have unique and customized challenges. So I'd offer to you, you can call me, email me. There's my colleague Lindsay. You can contact her. I'm happy to talk to you one-on-one about what these actual survey results and some of the tactics and how they might apply to you with challenges that you have. You have custom challenges and they need custom solutions. I'd also invite you to go to Story2You. We'll alert you when the white paper comes out in August. It'll have all of the surveys with all of the survey questions, with all of the results and all of the commentary, including best practices from folks like yourself in the marketplace who we reached out to kind of bounce the survey results off to and get their take on it. So with that, I thank you for your time. We're about 41 minutes in. I got some time for Q&A.
Thanks so much for all your information today, Jay. We have a couple questions that rolled in during your presentation. I'll start off with this one. What are the age demographics of the prospective students sampled in the inquiry phase of your survey for social engagement?
Great question. They were between